Before we begin this story, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because here you'll find horror stories, real mysteries, and tales that will keep your mind on the edge of your seat until the very end. And I want to know from you. Comment below where you're watching from. Let's see how far this story goes. The property was isolated at the end of a narrow road, surrounded by tall trees that blocked almost all the sunlight. The mansion, though imposing, bore clear signs of recent abandonment. Windows hastily closed, curtains still intact, and a garden that seemed to have been left behind overnight. Lucas Andrade stopped his car in front of the rusty gate, observing the place attentively. An investigative journalist, he had traveled there after receiving an anonymous tip. An extremely wealthy European family had abandoned that property in the United States without any explanation after a single night. No sale recorded, no official change, no trace. They just disappeared. Lucas pushed open the gate, which slid open with a long, unsettling creak. He walked slowly toward the house, feeling the weight of the surrounding silence. No birds, no wind. Nothing. The main door was unlocked. That was already wrong. He went in. The interior seemed frozen in time. An old clock on the wall showed 2:17 a.m. Stopped. A wine glass on the table still had dried residue at the bottom. An elegant coat lay draped over a chair, as if someone had stepped out for a moment and never returned. Lucas took some photos. Everything indicated urgency. But there were no signs of a struggle. No signs of forced entry, no broken objects. It was as if everyone had received the same silent order and simply left at the same time. As he walked through the main room, his footsteps echoed strangely, as if the space were larger than it seemed. He paused for a moment. He had the feeling that he was not alone. He turned around quickly. Nothing. He took a deep breath, trying to stay focused. He had investigated strange cases before, disappearances, cults, cover-up crimes, but this was different. There was no chaos here. There was organization, and that was much worse. He walked down a long corridor where old portraits hung, unfamiliar faces, all with serious, almost uncomfortable expressions. In one of them, an aristocratic-looking man, probably the owner of the property, stared directly at the camera with a rigid gaze. In the lower corner of the frame, an inscription, Duke Victor Albrecht von Hohenberg. Lucas frowned. A European duke living there, secretly in the United States. That didn't make sense. He continued walking until he found a half-open door at the end of the corridor. Pushing it open, he revealed an elegant office. Books were neatly arranged, documents scattered about, and a heavy, dark wood desk stood above. Something is out of place. There were marks on the floor, near the table, as if something had been dragged. Lucas bent down, running his hand over the floor. The marks continued all the way to a wall, which looked completely normal. He tapped lightly with his knuckles. "I am a dad." His heart raced. He searched for some mechanism until he found a small lever hidden behind a book. When he pulled it, the wall moved slowly, revealing a narrow, dark passage. A secret entrance. Lucas hesitated for a moment, but curiosity got the better of me. He turned on his cell phone flashlight and went inside. The passageway led to a staircase that descended into what appeared to be a basement. The air there was colder, and there was a metallic smell, almost imperceptible but present. When it came to an end, the light revealed something that made his body freeze. The floor was marked with symbols, circles, intertwined lines, complex designs that looked ancient, rituals. In the center, there was a chair, orders, empty. Lucas took a step back, feeling a shiver run down his spine. That was more than just a disappearance. It was something much deeper, much more planned. And then he listened. A sound. Up there, steps, boards, dragged. Lucas froze. He was absolutely certain that he had entered that house alone. Lucas climbed the stairs carefully, trying to control his breathing. The sound he had heard had ceased, but the feeling of presence remained, dense, almost palpable. Upon reaching the hallway again, everything was exactly as before. Absolute silence. He moved forward slowly, observing each detail more carefully. Now the house no longer seemed merely abandoned, it seemed observant, as if each object held a memory that had not yet been revealed. Lucas decided to step away for a while. He needed perspective. Outside, the sky was beginning to darken, tinged with cool hues. He walked to the car, grabbed his recorder, and made a call. "Marta, I need you to dig up as much information as you can about this name, Victor Albrecht von Hohenberg." On the other end of the line, Marta, her investigative partner, responded with the calm of someone already accustomed to strange requests. "I started even before you called. This guy isn't just any duke." Lucas leaned against the car, alert. "What did you find?" The Hohenberg family has a long history in Central Europe. Money, influence, but also some strange stories. Missing documents, abandoned properties, always the same pattern. Lucas remained silent for a few seconds. Disappearances? Not exactly. Officially, sudden changes, but always surrounded by inconsistencies. And there's more. She hesitated. He speaks. In some older files, there are mentions of private rituals. Nothing proven, of course. But there are descriptions of nighttime meetings, symbols, things that are reminiscent of secret societies. Lucas looked at the house, the basement, the symbols on the floor, the chair. "That's no coincidence, Marta." "I know. And there's something else you need to see. I'll send you a file." The phone vibrated. Lucas opened the image. It was an old photograph, the same room where he had been minutes before, but occupied. Several people, formally dressed, gathered around a circle drawn on the ground. In the center, someone sat, their face impossible to identify, and in the background, the Duke, observing everything. Lucas zoomed in on the image, feeling his stomach clench. This photo, when was it taken? There's no official date, but judging by the paper and quality, at least a few decades old, maybe more. Lucas took a deep breath. "Marta, this house wasn't abandoned out of fear. Then why?" He looked at the property again. The windows were dark, the heavy silence. Because something went wrong. The line went silent for a few seconds. "Lucas," her voice returned, more serious, "you're not planning on spending the night there, are you?" He didn't answer immediately. He stepped away from the car and turned back to face the house. Something there was still incomplete, something that needed to be understood. That's a terrible idea. It's the only way to find out what happened on the other side." Marta sighed. "Then at least don't do it alone. I'll see if I can find someone from the area to help you." Lucas hung up without waiting for a reply. He had already decided. Upon returning inside the house, the atmosphere seemed even heavier. The natural light was rapidly fading, and darkness was beginning to engulf every corner. He began to explore the other rooms. In the kitchen, everything was too organized. Clean dishes, utensils in their place, but the refrigerator was empty, completely. It's as if they had planned to leave, but hadn't finished. Upstairs, the rooms told silent stories. One had clothes scattered about as if someone had tried to pack a suitcase in a hurry. Another was immaculate, almost untouched. But it was in the last room that Lucas found something different, a box hidden under the bed. He pulled it and opened it. Inside, there were old documents written in German. Photographs, notes, and a small black-covered notebook. Lucas opened the notebook. The pages were filled with precise, almost obsessive handwriting. He didn't understand everything, but some words kept repeating themselves. Cycle, transfer, container. And one sentence, written with more force than the others. The next phase requires full presence. Lucas slowly closed the notebook. That didn't seem like a typical record. It looked like a manual, about something that hadn't finished yet. A crackling sound echoed down the hallway. Lucas raised his head. This time it wasn't my imagination. Someone, or something, was moving inside the house. Lucas quickly closed his notebook and stood up, his whole body on alert. The sound in the hallway left no doubt. There was real movement inside the house, and it wasn't recent, it was continuous. He slowly left the room, keeping his cell phone with the flashlight on, pointing ahead. The beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing the empty hallway, but with something different, the office door. It was open. He had previously been certain that he had left it locked after leaving. My heart raced. Lucas began walking towards the office, each step calculated. The silence was now heavier, broken only by the slight creaking of the floorboards beneath his feet. When he reached the door, he stopped. The air inside felt colder, denser. He went in. The secret passage was open again, but that wasn't the worst part. The marks on the floor were different, deeper, most recent, as if something had been dragged away again, just a few minutes ago. Lucas knelt down, running his hand over the marks. There was still some fresh, displaced dust. This had happened after he climbed up, after he left there. A shiver ran down his spine. He pointed the flashlight at the staircase leading to the basement. Total darkness. But this time, there was a sound coming from down there, a low, rhythmic sound, almost like breathing. Lucas swallowed hard. Every instinct screamed at him to get out of there, but something else spoke louder, the need to understand. He started to go down, step by step. The sound grew clearer with each step. It wasn't just breathing, there was a pattern, almost like a repetitive murmur. When she reached the bottom of the stairs, what she saw made her body freeze. The chair in the center of the symbol, it was no longer empty. Someone was sitting there, property, head down. His arms were tied. Lucas took a step back, his heart racing. "Hey!" Her voice came out low and tense. "Are you okay?" No response. He approached slowly, keeping his distance. The person appeared to be wearing the same clothes as in the old photograph. Elegant, outdated. But it didn't make sense. When the flashlight's light illuminated his face, Lucas felt the world spin. It was the Duke, exactly as pictured. No aging, no change, as if no time had passed. Their eyes were closed, the skin too pale. Lucas instinctively recoiled. "That's not possible." The murmur grew louder. Now it was coming from all sides. Not just the man in the chair, from the walls, from the ground, from the air itself. Lucas spun around quickly, trying to identify the source. The symbols on the floor were changing. Lines that once seemed static now expanded slowly, as if being redrawn by an invisible force. And then the man in the chair took a deep breath. Abruptly, his eyes snapped open all at once, fixed in Lucas, empty, but aware. "You arrived too early." The voice came out low, distorted, as if more than one person was speaking at the same time. Lucas froze. "What is that?" The man tilted his head slightly, observing him. "The cycle has not been completed." The chair's restraints began to move on their own, tightening their grip on his arms even more. They tried to escape. The voice faltered for a moment, as if something was being forced through it. But nobody leaves before the transfer. Lucas took a step back. Transfer of what? Silence. And then a slow smile appeared on the man's face. Of place. The flashlight's lights flickered. The air grew even heavier. And without warning, Lucas heard footsteps behind him. Very close. This time there was no doubt. He was not alone, and it wasn't just a presence. There were several. Lucas didn't turn around immediately. The footsteps behind him were slow, coordinated. More than one person, maybe 3, 4. Hard to say for sure. My instinct was screaming at me to run, but something kept him still. "You shouldn't be here," said the voice behind him, low, almost a whisper. Lucas turned around abruptly. 3 people were standing at the entrance to the basement. Real estate. Eyes fixed on him. They were dressed in simple, modern clothes, completely different from the man in the chair. They were young, 2 men and a woman. Their faces were pale, as if they hadn't slept in days, or weeks. "Who are you?" Lucas asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The woman took a step forward. "We came to help you." The response was too quick, too automatic. Lucas narrowed his eyes. "Help? With what?" One of the men replied without looking away. "Getting out of here." Lucas let out a slight nervous laugh. "Funny, because so far it seems like you're part of this." Silence. Tensions rose. The woman took a deep breath, as if she were fighting against something internal. "You don't understand," she said more slowly. "No one who comes in here leaves the same way." Lucas glanced quickly at the man in the chair. He was still watching, still waiting. "Then explain," Lucas retorted. "Why that guy over there doesn't seem to have aged in decades." One of the men stepped forward. "Because he is no longer alive." The silence that followed was heavy. "He is the central point," he continued, "the original vessel." Lucas felt his stomach churn. The words from the notebook came to mind. Container, transfer. "What did you do here?" Lucas asked, now more serious. The woman replied, "We didn't do it. We were brought in." She discreetly pointed to the floor. "Just like you." Lucas frowned. "I came on my own." The 3 exchanged quick glances. "No," said the other man. "You were called." Lucas remained silent. "The anonymous call. Tell me, the address." Everything seemed too convenient. "That proves nothing." The woman moved a little closer, now visibly tense. "We all received something, a message, an opportunity, a promise, something that brought us here." Lucas felt a chill. "And then what?" "Then—" She hesitated. "The house decides." A dry sound echoed in the basement. Everyone looked towards the center. The man in the chair began to squirm slightly. The lines on the ground were more intense now, forming more complex patterns. "We don't have much time," one of the men said urgently. "The cycle has already begun." Lucas looked at them. "So explain it to me properly. What is this cycle?" The response came quickly. "Replacement." Silence returned, but this time laden with meaning. "Every so often," the woman continued, "someone takes his place." Lucas looked again at the man in the chair. "And who chooses that?" No one responded immediately, but they all looked in the same direction, to the ground, for the symbols. Lucas took a step back. "No!" The man in the chair made a strange sound, something between a laugh and a gasp. "They always say that." The ropes tightened even further, but the cycle never fails. Lucas turned to the 3 of them. "And you? Why are you still here?" Silence. "So finally, because we weren't chosen." The response was curt, free. Yet a loud bang echoed above them, like a door slamming shut. The whole house seemed to vibrate. The phone light flickered again, and for a moment, Lucas saw something reflected on the blank screen. Behind him, very close, a shadow, high, property, observing. When he turned around, there was nothing, but the atmosphere changed. And everyone felt it. The house wasn't just reacting, she was deciding. The silence in the basement was broken by a sharp sound, like metal being slowly scraped. Lucas turned his head, trying to locate the source. It came from above, from the main floor. But this time, it didn't just sound like noise. It was a pattern. 3 scratches. Break. 3 scratches again. The woman's eyes widened. "It started." Lucas looked at her. "What exactly started?" But before she could answer, the lights on her cell phone went out completely. Total darkness. The murmur returned, higher, closer, and this time organized, like voices repeating something in unison. Lucas tried to turn the flashlight back on, tapping the device. Nothing. So, slowly, a faint light appeared on the ground. The symbols, shining, thin lines of a pale, almost white shade lit up one by one, forming the complete design beneath her feet. The man in the chair raised his head. His body was trembling now, violently. "No," the woman whispered. This has never happened so fast. "What's going on?" Lucas demanded. One of the men answered, his voice faltering. "He doesn't want to wait any longer." Lucas's heart raced. Who? Silence. And then the response came from all sides. At home. The ground vibrated, a dry crack echoed, and one of the basement walls slowly creaked, as if something were pressing down from the other side. Lucas instinctively recoiled. That doesn't make sense. Houses don't get to choose anything. The man in the chair laughed, but it wasn't human laughter. "Do you still think this is about the house?" His body began to rise, even though he was restrained. The ropes were tightened to their maximum. "This is just the container." Lucas stood motionless. A container for what? The man's eyes gleamed faintly with the light of the symbols. Something that needs to continue. One of the young men began to back away. No, this isn't normal. He shouldn't wake up like this." The woman grabbed Lucas's arm. "Listen, if he chooses you, he won't resist." "Choose?" Lucas pulled his arm away. "I wasn't chosen for anything. You entered the center." She pointed to the floor. "You activated it." Lucas looked down. Without realizing it, he was standing directly over one of the main intersections of the symbol, the central point. The air grew heavier, difficult to breathe. "No," he whispered. The man in the chair stretched his neck in an unnatural way. "Now it makes sense." The ropes started to come loose on their own, one by one. After all this time, Lucas tried to move, but something was stopping him, as if the ground held him captive. "I'm not going to stay here," he said, straining his body. "That's not going to happen." The other man shouted, "Don't fight. It will only make things worse." Too late. The symbol beneath Lucas's feet shone even brighter. And then a memory invaded his mind. It wasn't his. Quick images, people gathered together, the same room, the same ritual, but at different times, different faces, always the same result. Someone in the chair, someone in the center, replacement. Lucas fell to his knees. No, this isn't real." The man's voice echoed directly in his mind. "It's always real, when your time comes." Lucas looked up, and at that moment, he understood the connection to Photo, the address. Nothing was a coincidence. Everything was taken care of. "You brought me here," he said with difficulty. The man smiled. "No." A pause. "It's colder, heavier. You agreed to come." The ground shook violently. The basement walls began to crack. The other three ran backward, trying to climb the stairs. "It's over now," one of them shouted. "He's been marked." The woman still hesitated, looking at Lucas, divided. "Is there any way to stop this?" Lucas shouted. She replied, her voice breaking, "Just one." Silence. "Someone needs to take your place." The world seemed to stop for a second. Lucas looked at her. Then for the others. Then for the man who was now completely free from the chair. And at that moment, everything changed. Because now it was no longer about uncovering the mystery. It was about surviving him. Chaos ensued immediately. As soon as the last rope snapped, the man, or whatever it was, fell forward, supporting himself with his hands on the ground. His movements were erratic, uncoordinated, like someone who was relearning how to use his own body. Lucas was still kneeling in the center of the symbol, trying to regain control of himself. The feeling of weight in his body increased with each passing second, as if something was slowly fitting itself inside him, or taking up space. "Get up!" shouted the woman, taking a few steps back towards him. The other two had already climbed halfway up the stairs, clearly ready to escape. Lucas tried to stand up, but his legs gave way. "I am unable—" The man behind him made a low sound, something between breathing and a deep crack. "It's already started." The voice was now more stable, more present. Lucas turned his head slowly. The man was standing, completely free, but something was wrong. His posture was too rigid. His movements calculated, as if each gesture was learned the instant it was executed. "This shouldn't be happening like this," said one of the young men desperately. "He should disappear, not get out of the chair." The woman grabbed Lucas's arm and tried to pull him away. "Come on, you need to get out of the center." Lucas strained, and for a second, he managed to move a few centimeters, but the symbol reacted. The light beneath his feet pulsed violently, and he was thrown back to the ground. A dry impact. The air escaped from his lungs. "It's no use," said the now free man calmly. "The more you resist, the faster it happens." Lucas tried to crawl out of the circle. Each move was more difficult than the last. It was as if it were being pulled downwards. "Help me!" he shouted. The woman hesitated again. He looked at the other two. They shook their heads. "No!" one of them shouted. "If you touch him, you'll get caught in the cycle too." She froze. The conflict was visible on his face. "I can't leave him like this." "You've done this before," the other replied. "Remember what happened?" Silence. She let go of Lucas's arm. He took a step back. That was enough. Lucas understood. He was alone. The man began to walk slowly around the circle, observing, studying. "Interesting," he said. "This body is different." Lucas looked up, breathless. "What are you?" The man stopped. She smiled slightly. "I am what remains after each choice." The ground began to vibrate again. The cracks in the walls widened, revealing ancient structures beneath the concrete, as if that house had been built on top of something much older. "This is going to collapse!" shouted one of the young men, already at the top of the stairs. "It's not the house," the man said. "It's the process." Lucas felt a sharp pain in his head. The images have returned, stronger, clearer. People being led to the center. Others are watching. There's always someone hesitating. Someone is always abandoning them. "You knew," Lucas said with difficulty. "You knew, and yet you stayed." The woman replied in a low voice, "Because leaving doesn't mean escaping." The silence that followed was more terrifying than any sound. Lucas stopped fighting for a moment. "Like this? Whoever enters here takes this with them," she said, pointing to her head. "Dreams, voices. He keeps calling." The man started moving again, now closer. "Some resist for years," she continued. "Others come back." Lucas's eyes widened. "You're back together?" No response. But it wasn't necessary. He understood. The cycle didn't just happen inside. It all started there. But it continued outside. The man stopped right in front of him. He looked directly into her eyes. "You can feel it, can't you?" Lucas did not respond, but I felt it. Something inside him was changing, reorganizing. "No," he whispered. "Accept it," said the man. "It's easier that way." Lucas closed his eyes tightly. He took a deep breath, and for the first time since he entered that house, he stopped resisting on impulse, and he began to think. If someone needed to take his place, so there was still a choice, and choices, they could be manipulated. He opened his eyes again, different, more focused. "You said this is about choice." The man tilted his head slightly, curious. "Try." Lucas swallowed hard. "So maybe you chose the wrong person." The silence that followed was different, tense, loaded, because at that moment, for the first time, something in the cycle seemed out of control. The silence in the basement was no longer just fear, it was expected. The man in front of Lucas, that presence now occupying the body of the former Duke, watched him with heightened attention. For the first time since his liberation, there was something different in his expression. Doubt. "Wrong," he repeated slowly. Lucas took a deep breath, still kneeling, feeling the weight of the symbol beneath his body, but now trying to ignore it. "You said you need someone who will accept, who will complete the cycle." The man did not answer, but he didn't look away. "So why am I still resisting?" A slight tremor ran through the ground, subtle but present. Lucas realized that defied logic regarding the intention. Everyone else accepted it at some point, didn't they? He continued, even if out of fear or desperation. The woman, still near the stairs, looked at him with renewed attention, as if he was beginning to understand what he was doing. But you don't have complete control over that, Lucas insisted. You depend on a decision. The man tilted his head, analyzing. The decision always comes. Lucas forced a slight smile. But what if he doesn't come? The air grew heavier. The symbols flashed. Unstable. For a moment, they failed. The three in the back realized it at the same time. He's right, one of them murmured. No one has ever resisted this much before. Lucas felt the weight ease for a fraction of a second. It wasn't enough, but it was enough. He braced his hands on the ground and tried to stand up again. This time, he managed to lift the trunk, still in jail, but less so. This isn't automatic, Lucas said, now more firmly. You can't just force me. The man took a step forward, closer. Their faces were now just inches apart. I don't need to force it, she said softly. I just need to wait. Lucas held her gaze. Then wait. Silence. Heavy, denso. It's dangerous, because that was a risk. But it was also a break. For the first time, the cycle was being delayed. The woman stepped forward, this time with more decisiveness. If he can resist, then there's still time. What's the point of having time? Asked one of the men, still hesitant. She answered without taking her eyes off Lucas. To change the outcome. Lucas glanced at her quickly. Is there any way to stop this altogether? She hesitated, but this time he didn't back down. Perhaps. The man reacted immediately. The entire room vibrated with excitement. There is no interruption, he said, his voice heavier, only continuity. The walls shook. More cracks appeared, but Lucas did not deviate. Everything that begins can stop. The man smiled, but there was tension now. You think like they thought? Lucas shook his head. No, they wanted to escape. He strained, and this time he managed to put one foot outside the symbol's line. An invisible impact traveled across the ground. The power went out again. I don't want to run away, Lucas continued. I want to break this. The silence was absolute. The three in the back stepped back a little further. But they didn't run. They were watching, waiting. The woman took another step, now closer to Lucas than to the others. The notebook, she said suddenly. Did you read anything useful? Lucas tried to remember while maintaining his focus. Cycle, transfer, container, and then complete presence, he said. Her eyes widened. What does it mean? He asked. She replied quickly. The process only works if everyone is involved. Lucas understood, and he looked at the other two. You three are part of this too. No. They froze, one of them said. We just stayed here. They stayed, Lucas interrupted. They participated. They watched. They came back. Silence. Heavy. So you're still inside, he concluded. The man reacted forcefully. The ground shook again. That doesn't change anything. But it was changing, Lucas realized. The reaction was too immediate. It does change, he said, now more firmly, because if everyone is part of it, he looked directly at the woman. So anyone can take the place. The shock was immediate. No, she whispered. Or, Lucas continued, nobody occupies it. The silence that followed was unlike any other. It wasn't fear, it was a possibility. The man took a sudden step forward. This is not a collective choice, Lucas answered without hesitation, but it depends on everyone. The symbol failed again, stronger, more visible. The light flickered erratically, and for the first time, the man stepped back. One step, small, but it's real. The woman took a deep breath, as if he were making a decision he had avoided for a long time. And then he said, if we break the pattern, the cycle could collapse. Lucas nodded, even though his body still felt heavy. Then we break up. The man no longer smiled. The expression had changed completely. "You don't know what you're doing," Lucas replied firmly. For the first time, he pulled his body a little further out from the symbol. Another step forward. More pain. More effort. We know exactly. And at that moment, fear is no longer the central issue. Now there was something stronger. Decision. The air in the basement was unstable. With each passing second, it seemed more difficult to maintain balance, not just physical balance, but balance with the surrounding reality. The walls were no longer just walls. Cracks revealed ancient layers, stone structures far older than the house itself. The place wasn't falling apart. It was being revealed. Lucas forced his body once more and managed to lift his second foot off the symbol. As soon as he completely crossed the line, an invisible impact rippled through the air, as if something had been forcibly interrupted. The light on the floor flickered violently. The symbols began to disappear, line by line. "It worked," one of the men murmured, incredulous. But the woman did not relax. "No, this is just the beginning." The man, or the entity, reacted immediately. His body froze for a moment and then moved with a speed unlike anything he had shown before. He moved forward. Lucas barely had time to react. He was thrown against the wall with force, the impact echoing through the basement. The air escaped his lungs again. "You can't leave like this." The voice was no longer just his. It was multiple, overlapping, unstable. "The process needs to end." The woman shouted, "Now! If we're going to do something, it's now." The other two hesitated for a second. But this time, they did not back down. They went down the steps again. The climate has changed completely. It was no longer about individual survival. It was a confrontation. Lucas tried to stand up, leaning against the wall. His vision was blurry, but he could still focus. "What do we do?" he shouted. The woman replied quickly, "The city center. We need to occupy the city center together. You said that activates the cycle." "Alone, yes," she retorted, "but together it could break." The man slowly turned his face towards her. "This has never been tried before." "Exactly," she replied. The silence that followed was short, because the environment reacted immediately. The ground shone again, but this time in an unstable manner, as if he didn't know which pattern to follow. Lucas pushed his own body forward. Pain, weight, but now there was purpose. The three ran toward the center of the symbol. With each step, the ground vibrated more strongly. "Don't do that," the entity said, now in a more serious tone. "You don't understand the consequences." "We understand enough," Lucas replied. The woman was the first to step back into the center. Nothing happened for a second. Then a pulse of energy traveled through the entire symbol. One of the men entered shortly after, then the other one. Lucas was the last one. Once everyone was inside, the ground exploded in light, but not like before. It was chaotic, irregular, as if multiple forces were trying to take control at the same time. The man stepped back for the first time, with obvious difficulty. "That's not possible," he murmured. The walls began to crack even more, now revealing ancient symbols engraved in stone, far more complex than those on the ground. "This is much older than the house," said one of the men, frightened. The woman grabbed Lucas's arm. "Stay strong. If anyone leaves now, everything will come back." Lucas nodded, even though his body was trembling. The air began to distort. Shadows appeared and disappeared around them. Human forms, others, not so much, like echoes, remnants. "It's the others," she whispered. "All those who passed through here." The voices began, overlapping whispers, incomplete sentences, orders, notices, despair. Lucas closed his eyes for a moment, trying to stay focused. "We need a goal," he said, "not just to stay here." The woman replied, "The cycle requires a single container." She took a deep breath. So we rule out that possibility. Lucas opened his eyes. How? She looked at the other two. Then, for him. Nobody accepts it. The silence that followed was heavy. Because it was more difficult than it seemed, the organization started moving forward again. Slower, but denser. You can't sustain this, he said. Someone will give in. Lucas looked at the others. Tiredness, fear, doubt. That's where the cycle always won. He took a deep breath. So we don't give ourselves time for that. What are you thinking about? The woman asked. Lucas looked around. The symbols, the cracks, the old structure, and then he said, we don't just break the cycle, he pointed to the ground. We destroy the place where it happens. Silence fell immediately. Heavy, but this time, different. Because the idea wasn't just to survive, it was time to close, sometimes. The organization stopped, and for the first time since the beginning, it seemed uncertain. The entire structure began to collapse, not like a simple collapse, but like something being ripped from the inside out. The ancient stones exposed on the walls vibrated. The symbols glowed in uncontrolled patterns, and the floor beneath the four in the center pulsed like a heart about to burst. Lucas kept his feet firmly on the ground, even with my body screaming to get out of there. Now, he shouted, if we're going to do it, we have to do it together. The woman nodded, squeezing his arm tightly. The other two exchanged one last look and agreed. Speechless. The entity moved forward, faster, more aggressive. The human form no longer held together completely. Parts of the body were distorted, as if something greater was trying to manifest itself through it. You can't destroy this! The voice echoed in multiple layers. This existed before you, before this house. Before everything, Lucas answered, even though he was having difficulty staying on his feet. Then it's high time to end this. He bent down with effort and placed his hand directly on one of the lines of the symbol. Immediate longing. As if it had touched something living. The woman did the same. Then the other two. 4 points, 4 interferences. The symbol reacted violently. The light exploded in intensity. The lines began to break. First one, then several, like a circuit short-circuiting. The entity screamed, this time out of control. No! The ground cracked open in the center of the circle. A dark void was revealed below, too deep to see the bottom. Air began to be drawn in. The voices grew louder, shouting, whispers, hundreds, perhaps thousands. Lucas felt his body being dragged forward. Hold on! Shouted the woman. They clung to each other, trying to maintain their balance. The entity tried to move forward again, but it was pulled back as well. His body began to fall apart, not in the flesh, but in form, as if it were made of something unstable. This is not the end, the voice echoed, fragmented. The cycle cannot be destroyed. Lucas clenched his teeth. Then we'll change the rule. He pulled his body further forward, ignoring the risk. If you need a container, he looked directly at the entity. Then there won't be any. The woman understood instantly. Lucas, no, but it was too late. He let go of one of his hands. And he moved forward, straight to the center of the crack. The impact was immediate. The light reacted. The remaining lines of the symbol collapsed completely. The entity was pulled violently, trying to resist, clinging to the ground, the walls, and even the echoes around it. You don't know what you're doing. Lucas looked at the three of them one last time. Without fear, just a decision. I know exactly. And then he threw himself into it completely. The entity went along, dragged, forced. No choice. The void swallowed them both. The light exploded. An absolute glare filled the entire basement. The walls collapsed. The ground collapsed. And then, suddenly, silence. Total. The woman and the two men were thrown backward by the shockwave. When everything stopped, the symbol had disappeared completely. The center of the basement no longer existed. The crack had closed, as if he had never been there before. The house was still shaking, but it was slowly stabilizing. The air, light again. The voices have ceased. One of the men took a deep breath, still on the ground. He finished? The woman did not respond immediately. She stood up slowly and looked at the empty center. I think so. But there was something different, something subtle. She closed her eyes for a moment. He felt the silence. For the first time. Real. No echo. No call. No presence. The cycle. It had been broken. But the price. It had been paid. The following days property was cordoned off by local authorities following reports of an unexpected structural collapse. No official explanation was released. No in-depth investigation followed. To the world, it was just another accident. But for those who were there, nothing was simple. The woman, whose name Lucas had only learned shortly before everything happened, Elena, left the place the following morning, along with the other two. None of them exchanged many words. There was nothing to say. They survived, but they didn't get away unscathed. For days, Elena waited, by the calling, through whispers, because of the weight on my mind. But nothing came. The silence remained, and that was strange. Because for the first time since she had entered that house, she was alone inside her own head, no echoes, without influence, without anything invisibly pulling at their decisions. It was freedom, but also empty. The other two went their separate ways. One of them left the country a few days later. The other simply disappeared, this time in a common human way, without any supernatural mystery. Elena stayed. Not out of attachment to the place, but out of a need to understand. She returned to the property weeks later, or what was left of it. The mansion was still standing, but different. Parts had collapsed, the interior was partially destroyed, and access to the basement was completely blocked by rubble. But what was most striking, it was the absence. No weight in the air, no sense of observation, nothing. She walked slowly through the empty rooms, now just silent ruins of something that once had a purpose. He stopped in front of the old office. The secret passage no longer existed. The wall was solid, intact, as if it had never been opened. Eleanor took a deep breath. "You did it," he whispered. No response. But for the first time, she wasn't expecting one. Months have passed. The property was put up for sale, but there were no interested parties. Stories began to circulate in the region, distorted, exaggerated, incomplete versions. But none of them came close to the truth, because the truth left no evidence. He left no records. He left no trace, just people and memories. Elena moved on with her life, little by little, day after day, no rush, without that constant feeling of being guided by something invisible. But sometimes, at specific times, too quiet, she would stop. And I thought, not afraid, but with a persistent doubt, if the cycle had truly ended or simply changed in form. Because in the end, Lucas didn't just destroy the process. He changed something deeper, something that no one fully understood yet, and maybe I would never understand. Months later, in another city, another state, a man stopped in front of an old house, observing it with silent curiosity. He couldn't remember exactly why he was there. I just felt that I needed to go in. His cell phone was vibrating in his pocket, an unread message, no sender, no history, just one address and a sentence. "The next phase requires full presence." The man frowned, confused. But even so, he took his first step towards the door. "And now tell me, do you believe the cycle has truly ended, or has it simply found a new way to continue? If you were in Lucas's place, would you have made the same choice, or would he try to escape, even knowing that he might never truly get away? Comment below with your opinion. I'd love to know how far you would go in this situation. If this story captivated you from beginning to end, follow the profile and share it with someone who loves mystery, suspense, and unexpected plot twists. Because the next story, It can start exactly when you least expect it.